Hello Pokepals, welcome back to another video. The North American International Championship happened earlier this June, and that means we had one of the largest tournaments for the format Gym Leader Challenge, or GLC. GLC has no official standings, but the community came together to compile the top 8 deck lists. In particular, we can thank Wheatr for writing an article with all of the results. A link to the article is in the description. There were plenty of strong decks, so let's take a look at the ones that made it to the top 8. If you want to learn more about the format Gym Leader Challenge, check out gymleaderchallenge.com for more information. Let's start by looking at the types. There were 3 Dragon decks, 2 Psychic decks, and 1 each of Water, Grass, and Lightning. Despite the strength of colorless decks, Turbolax in particular, there were none in the top 8. We'll discuss why this might be later. Let's start with the Water deck, which is a classic basic water energy acceleration deck also called Rain Dance. The deck has many supporting Pokemon. Baxcalibur and Frostmoth accelerate energy, Inteleon and Octillery help make the deck consistent, and Starmie recovers energy. Kyogre is a strong basic attacker that loops energy back into hand for the energy-reliant attackers Lapras and Wailord. I like the choice of Hydro Pump Wailord over Special Waves Wailord because of less reliance on special energy and, more importantly, it avoids playing into copycat attacks from Mimikyu, Zoroark, and Sudowoodo. This deck has Kyurem White, which is a strong basic attacker. With a fire energy, it deals 160 damage, a very relevant breakpoint knocking out Pokemon like Gallade, Garchomp, and Baxcalibur. This list plays Alolan Vulpix and excludes Hisuian Basculin, perhaps to have a better chance of getting Drizzile on turn 2. Most supporters are not surprising, but Hex Maniac is notable. Floatstone is the only tool card in the list, which makes sense to maximize early turn consistency. The most surprising exclusion has to be Brooklet Hill. Maybe the creator ran out of deck space with all of the attackers. Overall, I'm not surprised to see this deck in the top 8. Although the deck does not have a reliable way to take multiple prizes on the same turn, Wailord and Wishiwashi are naturally tanky Pokemon and give the deck comeback potential. Let's now take a look at the Psychic decks, starting with Solomon Surge's Psychic deck. This deck centers around Blacephalon, which places 12 damage counters when your opponent has exactly 3 prize cards remaining. The inclusion of cards like Counter Catcher, Counter Gain, Counter Energy, and Delinquent make it clear that the game plan is to have a strong turn when your opponent has exactly 3 prizes remaining. Necrozma is a strong basic attacker that helps you keep up in the prize race and is the reason why the deck has so many special energy. The combination of Mewtwo with Shining Arcana Gardevoir, Trekking Shoes, and Acrobike let you recover and use supporters from your discard pile. Overall, this is a very strong deck for a best-of-1 format. The surprise factor of Blacephalon and comeback mechanics can destroy opponents that are not prepared. That said, I think the deck can struggle against preparation and timely disruption. The other Psychic deck, piloted by Tyler Ashlock, is closer to a more standard Psychic deck, but it also has a couple of surprises. This deck has a strong group of support Pokemon. Gallade fetches supporters, and Malamar recycles energy from the discard pile, and Xatu accelerates energy from hand and draws cards. Wobbuffet and Marshadow are important for disrupting the opponent. Giratina is a unique attacker that can bring itself back from the discard pile, and the damage it spreads is useful for setting up plays with Natu, Devolution Spray, and TM Blindside to take multiple prizes. It also pairs well with Screamtail to set up bench snipes. This list runs Lieutenant Surge's strategy to have very explosive turns when coming from behind. Recycle Energy is a good inclusion to ensure that you attach an energy from hand every turn late game. It's something that I will consider in my own Psychic lists in the future. Overall, this deck is very well rounded with strong attackers, a way to take multiple prizes, and ways to make comebacks. The deck requires some setup, and none of the attackers are particularly tanky, but if it can stay close in a prize race, it has solid chances of winning even from behind. The 3 Dragon-type decks in the top 8 are all fairly similar because the Dragon-type has relatively few good Pokemon, so I'll summarize all 3 lists. The 2 strongest support Pokemon are Dragonite, which searches for supporter cards, and Gabite, which searches for Dragon-type Pokemon. It's no surprise to see every list include them. Due to common energy types, Drampa, Druddigon, and Regidrago are natural attacking partners with Garchomp. Flapple is a relatively new addition to Dragon decks since the first Dragon-type Applin was released in Twilight Masquerade, and it is very strong into opposing strategies that rely on abilities. The decks differ in which new support Pokemon they added, only Dracloak, only Tatsugiri, or both. It's hard to say which is best since they are both quite useful. Most attackers require multiple energy to attack, so Raihan and Mela are both important supporters to accelerate energy. Notably, every Dragon list had TM Turbo Energize in Fighting Fury Belt. The energy acceleration of Turbo Energize fixes the otherwise awkward attack costs of the different dragons, and Fighting Fury Belt can secure knockouts while making the dragons more difficult to knock out. Even without Turbo Energize, Dragon decks uniquely have access to Double Dragon Energy, which fixes energy costs by itself. This and Story Mountain are why every Dragon deck should run the supporter Guzma and Hala, which searches the deck for a tool, special energy, and stadium. As long as you can satisfy the attack costs, Dragon Pokemon will deal significant amounts of damage. Regidrago, Druddigon, and Drampa all hit the 116 benchmark that knocks out Excalibur and Gallade. I think the main weakness of Dragon decks previously was consistency and the lack of a good single energy attacker. With Tatsugiri, Dracloak, and Applin with Flapple, it's clear that the new Dragon support from Twilight Masquerade has shaken up the meta. Congrats on Morgan, Calyx, and second place finisher B-Meg for pushing the limits of Dragon. I would love to talk about the one grass deck, but it looks like the grass deck did not come to play in top 8, so let's move on to the first place deck, a lightning deck piloted by Dano. This deck spreads damage with Electivire and Raichu, which each deal 50 damage to each opposing Pokemon. Raichu requires existing damage but needs one less energy than Electivire. Tapu Koko and Regieleki, two stable lightning cards, also help spread damage. To get around bench protection abilities, the deck has Hex Maniac and Silent Lab. To enable the strong attackers, Zebstrika helps draw cards, and Flaffy and Electric accelerate energy from the discard pile. Morpeko is a surprise inclusion for consistency. It can discard useless cards from the top of the deck to give a higher chance of drawing good cards. Another uncommon addition is Recycle Energy, but it is good because most attackers in this list have one colorless energy in their attacks. Enhanced Hammer is a good inclusion to remove special energies like Counter Energy, Double Dragon Energy, Double Colorless Energy, etc. Given that Zebstrika discards unused cards in hand, cards like Enhanced Hammer can be more useful than an unplayable supporter card. Congrats to Dano for building and piloting a new Lightning deck to win GLC at NAIC. Takeaways. Let's start by looking at commonalities between the decks. Almost every deck has Hex Maniac, which speaks to how reliant most decks are on Pokemon abilities. Most decks also had Counter Energy, the exceptions being the Water deck, which relies on basic energy, and a Dragon deck, which not sure why it doesn't play it honestly. Two cards that are largely absent are Lost City and Tayden Liza, both of which are present in only one deck and are good cards against control. Perhaps a deck like Shocklock is positioned well in the current meta. The lack of Lost City and high appearance of combat cards like Counter Energy and Teammates suggest that Lost Zone Sableye could be strong right now. One surprising result was that there were no Turbo Snorlax colorless decks in the top 8, despite it being a strong deck. Why was this the case? I can think of a couple of reasons. 1. Turbolax has a lot of counterplay. Bench sitters like Bibarel and Squavit are vulnerable to bench damage. Pokemon like Natu take multiple prizes with one attack. Some Pokemon like Garchomp can stay invulnerable for a turn. The winning list played one copy of Enhanced Hammer, which can seriously slow down Turbolax. 2. Turbolax attackers require a lot of energy. Many attackers require 3 or more energy. Even with double colorless energy, twin energy, and double turbo energy, you still need more acceleration. Turbo Energize is good first attack, but that energy eventually runs out later in the game. 3. There aren't that many good attackers in Turbolax. Snorlax is good, but the other attackers struggle to hit high damage numbers. In order to knock out a Pokemon like Garchomp, Cyclizar needs to have powerful energy or Muscle Band. Kangaskhan needs both. 4. Turbolax in its current state is quite linear. Slacking can be useful to stop abilities, and both Swellow and Bunnelby can be useful for taking multiple prizes. Turbolax decks do not have these kinds of Pokemon, so the strategy does little besides hit the active Pokemon. I'm sure someone will find a way to make Turbolax better. Instead of Turbolax, we might have a different problem on our hands. The results of NAIC point out a long-standing issue. A lot of decks are not suited to dealing with spread damage. Is Lightning Spread problematic for GLC? Lightning Spread was fine before the release of Raichu and Temporal Forces because Electivire was the only strong spread damage dealer in Lightning. The addition of Raichu reminds me of Amazing Rare Kyogre. To be clear, Kyogre is largely better since 50 to 80 damage is a big difference. Still, Lightning decks have access to 2 attackers that both deal 50 damage. The duplication of attackers makes this comparable to attacking with Kyogre, then Rainfall Cast form. The power of Lightning Spread cannot be understated. Also, bench protection in GLC is not strong. Most types, specifically Fire, Lightning, Dark, Metal, Dragon, and Colorless, don't have access to reasonable bench protection. Psychic has Mew and Mr. Mime, and Water has Manaphy, but both are vulnerable to Silent Lab. Fighting has Machoke, and Grass has Rabsca, both of which are Stage 1 Pokemon that ignore Silent Lab, but Rabsca is tough to fit in decks, and Fighting is not a strong type at the moment. Of the top 8 decks at NAIC, only 2 for sure had bench protection, so the Lightning Spread's victory is not surprising. How about other ways to deal with spread damage? Most decks don't run healing cards like Mallow and Lana, and these cards create consistency problems, so most players choose to forgo them. Also, there are many cards like Picnic Basket that are only good against spread damage or don't heal meaningful damage. How about making a comeback? Lightning Spread is capable of taking multiple knockouts at the same time, so playing for a comeback is difficult. By the time you are able to play teammates after a multi-knockout, you may be too far behind. On the flip side, Lightning Spread is not unbeatable. If Zebstrika, the main draw engine, is knocked out, the strategy can struggle to draw through the deck. Having to discard cards also risks losing valuable resources like Field Blower and Rescue Stretcher. There are some stadiums like Rough Seas, Moonlit Hill, and Crystal Cave that heal damage. Sky Pillar is a defensive stadium that can protect your bench if it is not removed. Parallel City is useful to remove bench sitters or pivot Pokemon like Tapu Koko and reduce the top-end effectiveness of Lightning Spread. If your deck already has a bench protection Pokemon, Chaotic Swell can be useful to prevent Silent Lab from coming into play for free. So, is Lightning Spread problematic? If it's not respected, Lightning Spread is incredibly strong, but I believe the player base will find counterplay, and the meta will adjust to account for it in the future. At this moment, I don't think the deck needs any bans, but only time will tell. And that's a wrap for this video. As always, thanks for watching, and let me know what you think of the NAIC GLC event. Meta-analysis is fun to do, so I might make another video like this in the future. Until next time, Pokepals.